Hi, Koubra. Thank you so much for joining us at Hamilton Youth Workforce. My name is Khadija Hamidou, and I am the Executive Director here for Workforce Planning Hamilton, where we've kind of just started to put an importance or emphasis on youth employment in the Hamilton region. So how this kind of came to be is we were beginning conversations about the unemployment rates in the Hamilton region, and we really wanted to emphasize the youth unemployment rates, and we realized that was significantly higher than the adult unemployment rates. And we just wanted to really try to figure out ways to better help youth find employment, and not just any type of employment for youth, but meaningful employment in general. So I'm so glad that you're able to kind of join us here today. I will pass it over to you for introductions, and then we can kind of get started with this interview process.
Of course. Thank you so much. So my name is Koubra. As you mentioned, I am currently the manager of programs at the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, and I also work as an organizer with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network. And I, recently started in my position specifically at HCCI, and have recently also completed my bachelor's degree at McMaster in human behavior. So that's actually the building that I'm in right now. I'm in one of Mac's buildings. That's a bit about me.
Perfect. And thank you so much. I think this is a great conversation to have, especially from the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, just because you guys deal so heavily with youth. We're in the Hamilton area, and we just really would love to hear from your perspective on how to better support them. So one of the goals with Hamilton Youth Workforce is to be creating a community-wide strategy to support high youth unemployment rates and use technology familiar to youth specifically to assist with navigating labor market information and to provide helpful resources that may lead to employment in general. So you've been a part of the Hamilton Youth Workforce, and just in general, just trying to tell us a little bit more about your organization, the overview of your organization and its goals to contribute to youth employment.
Of course. So at the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, I think a lot of the main focus is specifically around, making Hamilton a very inclusive, welcoming, accessible city to, all community members. We work a lot in terms of anti-racism, for example, anti-racism work, equity and inclusion work as well. And we just want to ensure that everybody has resources and access to resources that can help them navigate the multiple, parts of what it means to be living in Hamilton, and being a part of the society. So I think at HCCI we focus a lot on under represented communities and underserved communities, and specifically Black communities, for example, Muslim communities, newcomers, and such. So a lot of our work also focuses on supporting youth in that, and specifically we have a Black Youth Mentorship Program, which I'm currently coordinating as well. And at the Black Youth Mentorship Program, we just provide youth with any mentorship opportunities specifically related or adjacent to the goals that they have, and to their interests as well. And for example, one of those things is right now, actually, I'm just I'm on upstairs, like on the side while they're doing their activities, but we're at McMaster University as they explore STEM with the Venture Academy here at McMaster. So we have some of the Black Youth Mentorship participants here for the day going through STEM workshops with folks at McMaster. So we really want to focus on making sure that these students and these youth have access to accessible mentors and access to information on how they can move forward in terms of their career or their education or anything adjacent to that. So I think it's really important to put a spotlight on what these opportunities look like, and make sure that these youth are aware that these opportunities exist, and connect them with the right resources to be able to navigate those spaces. And I think, even myself, I would consider myself a youth as a 22-year-old who's been working at HCCI or employed by HCCI for the past 2 years-ish. So since I was still a teenager, probably 19 or 20, and that's a major part of HCCI. Is a lot of the staff and employees are, what the majority would consider youth. So I think that's really important for us to put that emphasis on contributing to youth success, but also focusing on those who often are left out of those opportunities to reach those goals.
I love that. I think that's super meaningful, and we're here to talk about the successes of your organization and the programs that are currently coming from HCCI in itself. So when we're talking about, I think one of the goals with Hamilton Youth Workforce through Workforce Planning Hamilton is to make meaningful employment happen in the Hamilton region. So you're talking about STEM, and you're talking about all these different types of career pathways, and I think that in itself is just such a success. So my next question kind of leads to, what are some of the other successes that are coming from HCCI, and how is it really contributing to the unemployment rates or to the employment rate in the Hamilton region?
Yeah, of course. I think a major piece of success that I like to think upon when it comes to HCCI and the work that we do here is, the work that surrounds informing and making sure that people are engaged in conversations and engaged in, what is currently going on in Hamilton and what opportunities are available. I think it's really important for me and for HCCI as an organization to make sure that people are aware of these things. And for example, we are currently also running some civic engagement. For example, we have a survey currently out on the municipal election, just to kind of, I think the main goal of that survey, yes, it's to compile data and to hear what people have to say, but also stirring the pot and having that conversation going, and making sure that people are actually engaged in, for example, the conversation on municipal elections. So I think a big successful piece of the work at HCCI is that informing piece and is connecting people to resources that are important and available. And we did a lot of work with the community with regards to COVID-19, and we work in collaboration with many organizations such as Refuge, for example, or the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, and providing people with vaccine clinics and vaccination information sessions. And I think that has been super successful over the last year, and we've seen many folks kind of really understand the implications of COVID and how that can impact our health and our community as well. And we've been within communities, we've held vaccine clinics within the community in collaboration, of course, with these organizations as well. And we had great turnouts, all the time, and many people did get vaccinated. And I think that link to the community that really focuses on providing them with the tools and information necessary to make informed decisions on their employment, on their health, on their community, and on their future, I think is one of the most important parts of the work here at HCCI.
Absolutely. I know that I've seen a bunch of your marketing regarding, COVID-19 vaccinations, and the work that you're doing around the city is amazing. I think actually I got vaccinated through one of the HCCI marketing strategies regarding, COVID-19. So when we're looking at COVID-19, we knew that a lot of organizations, especially organizations that are dealing with youth employment, were struggling. They were trying to reconnect with youth and try to find a way that youth, would be most comfortable to continue getting support. So what were some of the barriers or challenges that your organization faced during the either recovery stages of COVID or the beginning stages of COVID?
Yeah, I think, one interesting thing that I often talk about, because I think it's still happening to this day, is the impacts of, how COVID really switched up the dynamics of how we interact with those around us, and how we really connect to community, and the people that we serve, I guess, as an organization. And I think back when everything was in person, that was a momentum or sort of a habit that people were very used to. And then we got into COVID, and it became very dangerous, of course, to meet in person or as big groups, and everything switched to virtual, or a lot of things switched to virtual. And not everybody was working in offices anymore, and school was online and things like that. And I think one thing that a lot of people did experience was that like online burnout, the Zoom burnout, the Microsoft Teams burnout, and it really, I think, not specifically just for HCCI, I think in general disengaged a lot of folks. But on top of that, I think as we went back into the course of not normal affairs, but I think more informed, safe methods of meeting in person, that also became difficult. In that, I think folks were also now used to not being around, like, so very socially present in live situations. So then that engagement piece also becomes difficult because, you know, people are burnt out from showing up to these conversations that we have on Zoom or on Teams or something similar. But at the same time, you know, they've lost touch, I guess, with what it's like to actually, you know, show up for in-person events or in-person conversations. So I think with the youth specifically as well, and that's something that I think was a big barrier and a big challenge was, you know, navigating, of course, how school worked out and how university and college and how everything turned out online. And, you know, a lot of those developmental milestones also happened online for many youth, and they didn't really get to experience a lot of, you know, what usually you would get to experience as, for, again, for example, a student, if things were normal or in person. And I think that was barrier, and it's hard to kind of be able to connect in ways that prioritize how people feel most comfortable connecting
Yeah.
with others, right? And just like making sure that there is always the option to stay connected online, but also providing folks, especially those who, you know, one, technology can be a barrier for many, and two, like Wi-Fi access and things like that as well. Like, are we providing what we need to be providing online, but are we also, you know, making sure that we're meeting folks where they're at? And I think having that good balance can also definitely be a challenge for many.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know that, you know, just trying to get online and trying to, you know, kind of go over those barriers and really try to connect has been
Hmm.
very difficult for everybody. So just imagining youth trying to navigate this into something that's going into like a new realm, like going
Hmm.
into university, going into high school and trying to navigate that is just in itself, just, I couldn't experience that. And I always go
Exactly.
back and I'm like, I couldn't imagine having like a frosh week online at this point,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's really interesting to see how, you know, like, you know, how much they've gone through these barriers and are still so resilient
Hmm.
in itself. So the next question that I really wanted to touch base on is the hiring proportion of, you know, youth. So when we're talking about youth not being in touch with, you know, the organizations that are helping them get employment, what were some of the barriers that you saw personally regarding, from a HCCI perspective, regarding how youth were getting hired? Did you
Hmm.
see that being a barrier in itself?
I don't know if specifically like youth hiring was a barrier in that, you know, as I mentioned previously, a lot of the employees at HCCI think a lot of our hiring is specifically, you know, of youth. But one thing that I would consider a big barrier when it comes to youth hiring is, again, that outreach piece. And for example, I remember, it's going to continue to be the case soon. But you know, for example, the Black Youth Mentorship Program had in-person sessions in the high schools, for example, and was able, you know, the program coordinators were able to connect with the youth at their schools, and you know, you're meeting people where they are, right? So you're providing everyone with the resources that are available in an environment where they don't need to go really, you know, look for them in a way that maybe they wouldn't be able to find them. And I think when everything kind of switched to an online um, situation, or when students were no longer able to be in schools and no longer able to be on university or college campuses, and people weren't really, you know, out here the way that we were previously, figuring out how to reach people individually does become very difficult. And I think that was a big barrier, is that are we actually reaching these people? Because I think a lot of the time, especially when it comes to online engagement, you're more or less engaged with those you that are within your circle, if that makes sense. You reach, you reach you know, your circle and maybe your circle's circle, but at a certain point, like it doesn't translate in the way in the same way that it would if things were more direct, or if you were actually, you know, looking for people and giving people resources and information in an environment where they're, you know, usually at or comfortable being in. So I think that is definitely a difficult piece of doing this work, is just understanding how to best connect with youth. And I think right now, specifically with the youth involved at HCCI, and you know, one thing that I actually did want to mention is, for example, we have summer students every year that work on different projects and different and different programs as well. And we currently actually just ended one youth student and program or project, and we have one in underway at the moment as well. That's still going on, and actually, our I don't know, is that appropriate to say their name? But they're working with us on the municipal election engagement strategies right now at the moment as well. So I think that's definitely a priority. And when it comes to the Black Youth Mentorship Program, I think having these activities in person now that we weren't able to do that for so long has been really great, because I think they feel re-engaged and reignited and re-energized to learn more about what options exist. And yeah, I think just providing them with those resources and opportunities in a setting that we're really reaching them where they're at is the most important piece.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you said reaching them where they are at. And then on top of that, the need of priority. So what is a current priority within the youth population? One of the things that we've heard as a huge priority right now is mental health, and knowing that mental health has taken a huge hit on everybody in general, but specifically in the youth population regarding connecting, right? Finding a better way to connect. And you said it yourself, we're only reaching a circle, or a circle of a circle, but not everyone is getting connected in that way. So mental health has definitely taken a toll. So how has mental health taken a toll on youth and employment in Hamilton from your perspective?
Yeah, I think even from recent conversations that I've had with some youth in my circles on employment and on mental health, I think there has been a lot of difficulties in kind of navigating one that you know things are kind of in person, things are kind of online, and again, those burnout factors that I did mention earlier. And I don't want to focus just specifically on COVID, because I know we know what those impacts have had, like what COVID has had, how COVID has had an impact on mental health in our communities.
Mhm.
But on top of that, I think the feelings of isolation that the youth have been experiencing because of this as well, like because of these circumstances, is really considerable. But on top of that fact, I think, and I'm going through this as well, and as a youth myself, I think often about what the state of housing is like in the city, what the state of groceries, gas, living, like it's become very difficult to be able to even afford to live in Hamilton, regardless of where you're employed, or especially as youth, because we understand and we know that a lot of the time people who are earning high money and enough money to sustain themselves throughout this, one, don't probably look like me, and two, are much older than what than myself or other youth that I've been interacting with. And I think that feeling of despair or hopelessness in terms of is this ever going to get any better, has
Yeah.
been very challenging. And I think that also translates in employment as well. Those feelings of hopelessness, or those feelings of despair, because even within employment, like sometimes I think a lot of what I've been hearing is like whether or not it's even worth it, or whether
Yeah.
this is you feeling like they are not feeling having to take on hours and hours and hours of work, or multiple employments to be able to sustain themselves, and then sometimes like not even being able to find any sustainable employment, when we know that just the living costs have been on the absolute rise at the moment. So I think there is a lot of anxiety around that, and I think that has had a large toll on mental health. And I think that's also been translating in the workforce, and that I think sometimes youth and people choose to go towards employments that may be better at sustaining them,
Yeah.
but at the same time it probably isn't what they're passionate about or what they're actually looking to do, because yeah, they don't feel like they have the time to do that,
Yeah.
and sustain themselves in a way that is um, healthy or meaningful.
Yeah, and you touched it right there, is the hopelessness of not knowing what's coming next, right? And that
Exactly.
uncertainty is
Mhm.
totally there. And from when you think about it from an organization piece, is how are we trying to connect with youth, and how are we trying to get onto their level regarding some of the things that they're facing? And these are the things that you just touched base on, is the housing inflation, is
Mhm.
all of these uncertainties that we as a population are currently dealing with. But then on top of that, coming into it from a perspective where you're not even aware of how to kind of navigate this. We kind of, from, my age group, where we know, how to navigate it a little bit when it comes to inflation, like, okay, we got to cut back on this, or we got to move forward with this. But from a youth standpoint, these are things that we're just learning, or these are the things that they're just learning. So it's really interesting to see how that continuation is going to happen within the employment sector, the labor market sector as a whole. So that's definitely something that we're keeping track of, and trying to take a look at, and informing the community on what the best practices are regarding that. So from an organization standpoint, can you identify barriers for employers when hiring youth? Because we've talked about some of the barriers that youth are experiencing, but when you turn it from a HCCI standpoint, you're hiring youth, what are some of the barriers that you're currently facing?
I think barriers in terms of hiring youth are in a way adjacent to the barriers that youth face in seeking employment.
Mhm.
And I think by that I mean sometimes it's difficult to reach, as I mentioned earlier, reach the youth in a meaningful way. And sometimes it's difficult to get youth to really be engaged or called to the work that is being done by your group or your organization, and things like that. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, um, and when we consider cost of living and housing and all of those factors for employers, I think it's important to stay in touch with those factors. And by that I mean it's important to also factor those specific things into hiring the youth. For example, when we know that inflation is through the roof, and that the cost of living and housing is also through the roof, it doesn't make sense to suggest the same salary, for example, as you would have 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when we know that that's no longer sustainable. And I don't want to say that that's a barrier for employers, because I think employers should actually actively be doing that, and actually actively be conscious of whether or not their employees are getting fair wages, and livable, more than sustainable wages. But I think that's also a policy piece that is super important for employers to kind of push on, and to talk about. And organizations should definitely be putting that pressure on policymakers and decision makers, with regards to these living conditions, and with regards to how how wages are just not sustainable a lot of the time, because of how expensive it is to live in Hamilton specifically, for example. So I think it's important to stay in touch with that conversation and put that pressure where it needs to be, and that isn't something that's separate from the work that is related to hiring youth or hiring in general. I think it's really adjacent and very closely intertwined, because employers or organizations and institutions have a lot more power than individuals to put that pressure on governing bodies, because I think these are choices that are being made. Like it's a choice to not work harder on making housing more accessible. It's a choice to not work harder on making employment opportunities available, and living expenses more attainable and sustainable. And I think it's really crucial for organizations and employers to put that pressure on as well.
Absolutely. And I think that right now employers are definitely understanding that. That's a conversation that we've had multiple times with, employers, and trying to get, some type of opinion out there regarding,
Mhm.
how can we not only it just being a living wage, but a sustainable wage where you're able to strive
Exactly.
at this point. And that's definitely something that we're starting to see in the Hamilton region, where, employers are really picking up on that and saying, okay, well, how can we meet the needs of what's currently happening right now? We know that inflation is happening. We know that the housing crisis is happening, and we know that youth are dead center in the middle of that. So how do we help each other out? And I think that we're in the Hamilton region specifically, we're coming up with, a little bit more unique programming, and a lot more different ways to kind of help with those pieces where, it's 50% us paying the wage, or 50% of the government paying the wage. And like, you're starting to see those things starting to happen, and which is promising, but it needs to happen on a larger scale, and it needs to happen on, within all employment. So it's definitely something that employers are facing, youth are facing. And as we continue to, have these conversations, it's just creating more of that education. So I'm glad that you're able to touch base on that.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, right now, when we're looking at the employment sector for specifically for youth, I think one piece that Hamilton Youth Workforce is always, very keen on introducing is not just getting youth employed, but getting youth employed in a field that they love and that they will stay in. And it's something that they can see themselves getting into a career path when you see that. So, in your opinion, what industries are youth interested in at this point in 2022 as of August 26th?
Yeah, I think honestly that it's interesting because I think as time goes on, youth are starting to realize more and more that there is an actual abundance of opportunities available, and not necessarily just like strict, positions that they must fulfill or that they must be
Mm,
involved in. And I think also as time goes by and as society evolves in different ways, new careers and new career pathways are invented or explored, right? So I think in this day and age, like we see many people or youth on a spectrum of interests, and some and tech jobs are very high desired, or marketing and social media and how they can really work to build in that industry. But I see a lot of youth who are also really passionate about community work, and a lot of youth who are really passionate about different types of social work and teaching and things like that. So I think it's the same and different in that I think there's a broader horizon or a broader view of what is currently available as opportunity, and opportunities continue to increase. But I think the most important part of that is also making sure that these youth know which opportunities do exist, and because I think often and I was told this throughout my whole life, and throughout my school years and things like that. And I am really passionate about what I'm currently doing at HCCI, and I really I loved what I studied in school and what I'd like to do in the future. But one thing that I remember, and I know is the case for many youth, is they're being told you have to go to university and do this, or you have to go to college and do this in order to get this job. But the skilled trades exist, for example, and I think a lot of youth were not in tune with that or cognizant of those things, because those opportunities are just not brought forward to them because of the fact that there is such a stress put on things that I consider elitist, really. And even when we consider the lack of opportunities when it comes to university and college for specifically racialized youth and disabled youth, and other marginalized youth, they aren't being told about the other opportunities that exist, and they're also being barred from the opportunities that exist in terms of higher education. So I think it's really important at HCCI, but in general, to bring these opportunities forward and show these youth that this also exists as an option, and if you would like to do this instead of this, that's also totally okay and totally fine. It all everything is related to what what you would like to do should really be about what you would like to do, and not about what people are telling you should be doing. So one, identifying those careers and identifying those pathways to these youth is very important, but also connecting them to the proper supports and mentors that will help them navigate those spaces and move forward in those spaces is also, I think, a very big priority for me and for HCCI.
I think the one thing that I'm incredibly impressed with when it comes to HCCI is Black youth going into the STEM program and having those opportunities to get into the sciences. I think when it comes to racialized youth, we're put into this box of this is the steps that you need to do and this is your only option. So being able to be introduced to something and being continuously introduced, and that's the key here, is that there's a continuation of the program that you're doing. It's not just here you're exposed one day and that's it. It's something that you're kind of continuously having these conversations with youth and racialized youth about the other opportunities that are presented, and giving them the opportunity to explore that at such a young age is key. And and kudos to HCCI for the work that's being done just to be able to introduce different career pathways that aren't necessarily given in a school setting or from a guidance counselor setting, right? So
Mhm.
if you when the way I'm leading that into the next question is, what advice would you give youth or other organizations when dealing with employment as a whole or different types of career pathways?
Yeah, I think the advice that I would give is definitely to think about, what passions you or what you're most passionate about, and what interests you, and really, I guess, moving on those interests and focusing on that, and really allowing yourself to explore what those interests are or what those passions are. Because, as I mentioned, often we're told we need to do a specific thing, but there are an abundance of career paths and opportunities that exist. And, actually, I'm thinking, and I think I actually have the book in my bag. I'm going to maybe show it. I think this is at Art Crawl. Yes, at Art Crawl in Hamilton on James Street. I came across, or I ran into a comic writer, and his name is MJ Roman,
Yes.
a Black person. And MJ showed me this book, and I was saying, like, this is so interesting and really cool. And I actually know a few Black illustrators in Hamilton as well, and I think that's a career path that is neglected or not spoken about. And I think it's super cool to see how people are just focusing on what passions them, and building a career out of that. And I was talking to MJ about how I think it'd be really cool to have MJ speak to the youth at, in the Black Youth Mentorship Program about storytelling, and about how he was able to write this story, and how they could write their own stories. And I think providing the youth with those new opportunities or those experiences that they've never considered before, that may trigger like a wow, like I'm really interested in that. And then giving them the tools necessary to really hone in on that, and focus on their passions. I think that's really important. And once you figure out what that is, and of course with the support of your community and those around you, it's really important to prioritize that, and yeah, work towards those goals, I would say.
Absolutely. I love that. And just being able to focus on Black youth in the arts, right? I think that's, and the abundance of
Mhm,
different career pathways within the arts, within the
mhm.
skill trades that you can kind of touch base on is key for me. So I'm really glad that you were able to even just, put MJ in this interview and just showcase that there are different types of career pathways that youth can really look into and appreciate, and really owning in on their skill. If you see that there's something that you love to do, and there is a way that you can kind of create that into a career path. So absolutely, just being able to own on your skills and really build from there is definitely something that we encourage here at WPH as well. So when we're looking into the shifts of all of these things that are happening within our community, from inflation to the housing crisis to the pandemic, from online to back in person, have you seen a shift happen when it comes to the programming that you're doing? I know that the STEM program is back to being face to face and in person. So have you seen that shift within youth excitement in general when it comes to these different types of career pathways as we've gone from the pandemic to these recovery stages?
For sure. I think there's been a lot of shift, and different things that have been happening within the programs that we're still trying to navigate. And I think a lot of people are still trying to navigate, and, like, again, striking that like balance, and knowing where to reach folks. And I think now having these in-person workshops, for example, or the work that we'll be doing with the youth in the fall and in the upcoming weeks and months, I think a new energy has come about in being able to kind of participate in these in-person workshops and in these in-person conversations and series. I think before, we of course needed to adapt to the situation that we were in, and we currently still continue to be in. And I think it's really important to prioritize health and safety, regardless of whether or not we're able to have in-person meetings or in-person workshops or conversations. So I think always being able to adapt to that ebb and flow of like how the things have been going down, and collaborating, I think, with adjacent organizations, or other folks who are in similar work, or who have similar goals. I think those collaborative efforts have also been very energizing. And I think collaborating with the other organizations, again, who have the same similar goals, can help in like connecting youth, and connecting folks to other resources, or to other groups that they can learn more from, or reach out to about employment, or anything similar. So I think being able to do these in-person events and barbecues and community gatherings and things like that has been great in being able to connect folks to different community groups and community members. But I think also, having that online presence and ensuring that we're putting the platform out there, and providing folks with the resources and opportunities and information necessary to access these opportunities is super important.
Perfect. And I completely agree with that. So, as we kind of head into the ending of this interview session, one thing that we want to really emphasize within the Hamilton Youth Workforce is some tips and tricks that you might have for youth regarding employment. So I'm going to leave the floor open to you to kind of provide some advice to youth regarding how to get employed in the Hamilton region or in Canada as a whole, as well as some of the tricks that you have picked up on over the last few years of working with youth in the employment sector.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about these, tricks that I'm thinking, or maybe even, the advice that I'm thinking through is specifically, again, in the context of HCCI and in the context that of the youth that I work with, is that a lot of the time the lack of employment opportunity or the lack of employment is due to factors that are outside of their control, and due to factors that impact them in a way that don't impact other people, or that are specifically tied to their ability to perform a certain way or speak a certain way or act a certain way, or to their race or religion and things like that. And I understand that that is one a major barrier for a lot of youth in Hamilton and elsewhere, in seeking employment and actually feeling. And I think sometimes it's not even having had those experiences also leads to a lack of confidence in seeking those employment opportunities. But I would say it's important to of course, try to get at any opportunity that does interest you, and you are worthy of what you would like to do, and you are capable of doing what you would like to do, and despite the fact that there are multiple forces that are working against you and make you feel, and forces that make you feel like you aren't able to do that, I think it's really important to believe in your skills and your ability to kind of get those jobs and navigate those spaces. Of course, it gets difficult, and you don't have to stick to something you don't want to do. If that's not something that interests you, you should have the freedom and the opportunity to kind of browse and not feel like you need to stick to something specific. Of course, I think one thing that I experienced, and one thing that I think a lot of racialized youth and Black youth experience as well, is trying to overcompensate by taking on a bunch of tasks and trying to demonstrate that you're competent at what you're doing because you believe, because others make you feel like you're not. I think that gets really difficult, and it's really hard, and it's you're bound to burn out if that's the case. So do things at a comfortable pace, and
Absolutely.
at a certain point it's really hard to you can't prove your worth to people who are not willing to acknowledge it or take that into consideration. So do what makes you comfortable, go through the flows of it, and take rest breaks, take time for yourself. And I think that's really important.
That's perfect. And thank you so much, Koubra. So there you have it, Koubra from HCCI, just here with Hamilton Youth Workforce, just trying to give as much notice and as much appreciation to all youth, specifically marginalized youth, specifically racialized youth, on how to find employment in the Hamilton region. So thank you so much, Koubra, for your insight and your knowledge. And I'm sure that we'll continue this conversation as we go.
Of course.
So thank you for thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. And we will have another episode of the Hamilton Youth Workforce from Workforce Planning Hamilton coming to you soon. Thanks.